Hello, friends. I am Michael Kingswood. This is Story Time. I share stories and I talk about writing things, occasionally listen to music, and generally just have a good old time here. On Tuesdays, we do chapters from my Glimmervale book, and on Saturdays, we do shorter works of mine that we share for, wait for it, Story Saturday. But today, we're going to visit an old friend of the channel. Not really an old friend. Our man Carl. I commented on one of his videos from a little while back. Our good old friend here. He's not a friend. I never met the guy, but I liked some of what he said on that one video of his, and it used him as a jumping off pad to share some of my own thoughts, and figured I would come across and do that again because I found this video of his from a few months back. It just popped up in my feed and was like, your novel is shorter than you think. And that was quite actually in line with some things I had been thinking about. And I listened to it, watched it, and was like, yeah, I once again agree with a lot of what he said, but once again have more thoughts that I figured I should share, so why not? So let's go. Let's see what Carl's got to say, and we'll see if I've got anything to add. Spoiler alert, I do.
Are you taking 80,000 words to tell a 30,000 word story? Novels aren't about telling a longer story, they're about telling a bigger story. 66,537, 56,538, 50... Damn it, I lost count. So you're writing along, just at that magical moment where your Google Doc crosses the length threshold between novella and novel, as stipulated in the UN resolution governing the length of works of fiction.
Actually, that's stipulated by the Hugo Awards. Actually, at least in the science fiction realm, the Hugo Awards laid out the criterion for the various length of stories that can be considered for individual awards. So short story is 0 to 7,500 words. Novelette was 7,500 to 17,500. Novella was 17,500 up till 40,000, and novel was above 40,000 words. So not quite a UN resolution. Better in many ways because it's actually got some legitimacy to it. Anyway.
Written something that's 80,000 words long, or 70,000 words, or 90,000 words, or whatever length will stop people from arguing about how many words a novel is. But have you given much thought to the length of your story? Or are you just writing towards the magic number that you have in your mind? Today, we're going to talk about the length of novels, the amount of time it takes to tell them, and about whether your writing is actually serving that length. This is something I've thought a lot about recently, and I've found it a great way to orient everything from your world building to character development to even how you write your prose. One of the fundamental elements of storytelling is delay. Having time pass between establishing an idea in your reader's mind and bringing some kind of resolution to that idea. This is important whether you're writing a novel, a short story, flash fiction, or even just telling a joke. There's a reason that there's always a delay between me asking you what's high in the middle and round on both ends, and then me telling you that it's Ohio. If I deliver the punchline too quickly, it ruins the joke. This is comedic timing. The same principles that make comedic timing work also explain why novels are as long as they are. Any story is going to have an ideal amount of time to be told in. You can't just plunk a character and a conflict into your reader's mind and then immediately solve it. It takes time for ideas to take root, for the readers to pick up on subtle emotional cues, for them to see who the characters are by the actions that they take.
That's all true. But it's not the reason why novels are the length that they are these days. Right? Your story needs to be as long as your story needs to be to tell the story and complete it, right? Whether that's, 1,000 words or 200,000 words. It shouldn't be any longer than it needs to be. Shouldn't be any shorter than it needs to be to get the story told in the way that's most effective. However, publishing is a business. If you look back 60, 70 years, novels were, we would almost call them novellas now. There's a reason why the novel cutoff for the Hugo Awards was 40,000 words and up, because that's what it was. Most novels were 40, 50, 60,000 words, not very long. But then they had a little hiccup in the distribution, a big hiccup in the distribution system for publishing. And as they came through the grommet on that, they found that their pricing structure, their expense structure was changed. And so they needed to start charging more for the books they were selling. In order to justify that in the mind of the customer, publishers then started requiring writers to make their novels longer. Whether it was because of the story needed to be or not, they didn't care. If they were like, no, we want at least 70,000 words. We want at least 80,000 words. Oh, it's a fantasy. It's got to be 100,000 words. Why? Because they needed to charge more because of the new pricing structures after the distribution collapse, and they needed to justify that. So what you found, especially in the 80s into the 90s, you started getting more door stoppers in the aughts, door stopper, especially fantasies, right? And you can okay, you look at Tolkien. Lord of the Rings is not a short book. It's not a short. It's one book, but even split into three, the way they published it, the three parts are not short. But compare that to your average Brandon Sanderson book, or your average Robert Jordan book, or George Martin, or there's other guys that are. I mean, you've got some of these books that are being released that are 400,000 words all by themselves, right? So, now partly that's because of the complexity of the story that's being told, but also it grew out of the publishers wanting to make the books longer so they could charge more. And so what you get sometimes then is and I've talked to older writers who went through this whole transition, and so they feel very, very relieved to not have to pad their books anymore. Some of these guys, they would just go and write little loops in the stories, and it's like, oh, okay, well, we're gonna set them off on a little side quest for a little bit. That doesn't really accomplish much, but but then it pads the story out a bit so they can meet the word requirements. Now, if you're got a character that people love and you're doing something fun in that side quest, I mean, it's not painful for the reader per se, but it doesn't directly advance the story. So, except that you get more characterization, which is always a good thing, and have more fun with it, which is always a good thing. But, strictly speaking, for the story that's being desired to be told, it wasn't necessary. So there's a little bit of dollars and cents reason why novels are the length they are these days. At least they were. Now with independent publishing, though, you can, make it as long or short as you want, get it out there to the readers, and the readers will like it or not, and it doesn't really matter. Hasn't always been that way, though. Anyway, getting back to what he's got to say.
Every story has an ideal length to be told in, an ideal delay between letting the reader know what the story's about and letting them know how it ends. The kind of story you tell in a flash fiction piece is very different from the kind of story you tell in a short story or in a novel. Different stories require different lengths of time to
100% agree.
Tell. There's also a certain marinating process that takes place with a novel. The time that a reader spends with an idea will change how they feel about that idea. Novels are interesting because they are generally read across multiple sittings, which gives the reader's mind time to process and reinterpret what is happening in the story.
I don't know about that. I mean, anybody who's ever opened up one of my novels will tell you they can't put the damn thing down. They just keep on going. They don't sleep. They don't eat. They forget to go to work. They miss studying for their finals because they can't stop reading it, and it just sucks them through. And then it's done, and they're like, "Oh my God, I just lost a week, but it was the best week ever, and I gotta get the next one." No, really, that's what happens all the time.
See this with events in your real life as well. How often have you been mad or upset about something and then you sleep on it and wake up with a different perspective? If a day has passed between when somebody has read a chapter of a novel and when they come back to read the next one, that time is going to change how they think about it. They're going to have a different perspective. They might not be consciously thinking about the novel in that time span, but unconsciously, they are probably thinking about it on some level. These elements all weave together. In a novel, you have a lot of space to get complexity across to the reader, and you also have the benefit of time for the reader to digest much of that complexity. The fact that the reader is going to put a novel down and go do something else is going to fundamentally change how they feel about that story, and it should affect how you write that novel.
Yeah, but again, just make it so they can't put it down. But, I mean, yeah, he's right. But I just have to joke about it. But sometimes you don't know that you're writing a novel until you've actually realized that you have a novel. So it's one of those things where it's like, it's not always something you can plan. But again, he's not wrong. I'm just riffing off it.
Length of a novel is not just about creating a longer work. It's a deliberate tactic that you can use to your advantage.
Yes, but like I just said, sometimes you don't know you have a novel until you have it. There have been a number of short stories I've written that I finished them up and they're like, well, okay, that's chapter 1. Right? It still worked as a short story, but it's like, oh, there's chapter 1, and it'll come back. And there's some other things that I thought, sure, were going to be, longer novels, and they ended up being like novellas or whatever. So I guess comes down to how you do business. I apparently don't plan things as much as Carl does, but hey, nothing wrong with that. Different strokes, different folks.
These features brought about by a novel's length allow you to tell different stories than you can with short or flash fiction, which is generally read in one sitting. It's not just about creating intrigue and then delaying them for 50,000 words until you get to the climax at the end. That's not how you write a novel. That's a recipe for failure. Problems start to creep in when you don't use a novel's length to your advantage. Novels aren't about telling a longer story, they're about telling a bigger story. You need to ask yourself,
Well, depends what you mean by bigger. What do you mean by bigger there? There's been plenty of novels that are not very big if you're talking about the scope of the plot, right? Just like there are many movies that are not very big by the scope of the plot. I mean, look at 12 Angry Men. It's just literally that. Just 12 dudes in a room talking for 90 minutes. I try to decide if they're going to convict the dude or not. But a lot goes on there, but it's not a big story. So I think big's probably the wrong word to use. Maybe deep, the depth of the story. Maybe it doesn't have to be especially complex, but it depends what you mean by big. But that said, get what he's saying, right? Maybe simple, because a short story is generally, simple problem. It can be a complicated problem, but quickly and simply resolved. And maybe that's the crux of the matter. What is, if it's more complex to solve or not? Anyway. I'm quibbling over terminology here, but you get what I mean.
Are you taking 80,000 words to tell a 30,000 word story? Or are you trying to cram a 150,000 word story into 80,000 words? Both.
Either one will not work. The 30 into 80 was required by publishers a lot, like we talked about earlier. But, and in the other side, some publishers won't publish stuff that's over a certain length, depending on the genre, and so people would have to compress things down too. So either way can hamper you. thank goodness for indie stuff where you could just do what needs to be done and not worry about publishers' whims anymore. Yay!
Situations will create problems. The former because you're drawing out a story way longer than it needs to be, and the latter because you're not giving the story proper room to breathe. You're going to be rushing to get it all in the length that you've given yourself. This is the tail wagging the dog. It's you fighting against the length of the medium rather than using it to your advantage. A story that is too short to be a novel is going to be bloated. There will be unnecessary scenes, dialogue exchanges that go on for way too long, scenes that start early and end way too late. If you feel you have room in your novel for anything meaningless, or you feel you need to pad it in some way, then you don't have a novel-length story. Every moment of your story needs to be a deliberate move towards plot progress or exposition or characterization or relaying theme or setting the mood. If you pull out a single line in your novel and it doesn't do any of those things, then you have to ask, why is it in there in the first place?
I get what he's saying, but that's going a little extreme. Even one line cannot be... Well, okay. You can take it a little far there. But yeah, he's right. I mean, but yeah, he's right. But there is room for having some fun in the scene just to have fun with it. I mean, yeah, it should push the story forward, but sometimes it's okay to have a little just witty banterisms, and that goes to character and all that sort of thing. So he said that too, character development. But it's possible to be too nitpicky, if that makes any sense. Anyway.
You shouldn't describe the color of your protagonist's eyes unless it benefits the story in some way, unless removing it will hurt the novel.
Well, here's the thing about that, right? And this is something that I learned, and I had never considered it before until I went to a writing workshop on character, voice, and setting. And everything that is described in the novel or in the story is characterization. Because you have a point of view character, and everything that is seen goes to and is described goes to what that person notices and what that person values or doesn't, likes or doesn't like, just by the nature of the description given. So there is no external narrator per se. Everything, if you're doing a point of view, because everything goes through the character. So if you're saying take something out, everything needs to advance the plot. Well, no, not necessarily, because everything goes to character. And as long as you're developing the character, that's cool. I mean, do you need to describe the character's eyes? Well, maybe. Yeah, maybe the character describing the character's hairstyle and all that stuff. Well, if you spend a lot of time describing the character's appearance and hairstyle and eyes and all that stuff, that tells you that, okay, well, maybe the character's vain or insecure or something, excessively focused on what they look like versus what everybody else, depending how you do it, right? So that's a characterization thing. Every detail that is mentioned goes to the character's attitude, what the character observes, what the character likes or doesn't like. Everything does. So it's being a little too simplistic here.
Everything you pull the reader's attention to should be important, should have some kind of meaning. Now, the response to this is going to be, well, the reader needs to know what my character looks like. And my response to that is, why have you designed the physical appearance of your protagonist in a way that doesn't serve the story?
Because that's the character. That's the characterization. The characterization is serving the story. The question doesn't make any sense.
Why do they have any physical feature that doesn't help you get your message across? The reader should be so engaged by the meaningful details that you're giving them that anything you don't describe, anything that isn't actually important, they will forget about and they won't care about because you've given them a bunch of stuff to care about. I think writers sometimes forget how much control they have over their own stories. You control every aspect of it, and every aspect needs to serve the story in some way.
This is correct. This is true. One of my writing mentors, always likes to say, writing is mind control. You take control of the reader's mind to have the reader see what you want them to see, think what you want them to think, feel what you want them to feel, notice what you want them to notice, so that you get the story across that you want them to get across, and thus make it compelling and rich for them. You control their mind to have the elements that you need to have happen so the story can flow. Which is basically what Carl's saying here, except a little more poetically.
You have control over how scenes are set, when we enter, when we leave, what the characters look at, what they smell like, what they notice. If the characters walking from one room to another room doesn't do anything to characterize or move the plot or do anything except move them from point A to point B, you have the power to change how those scenes are set up. You can change those scenes to the point where you don't need to show any of that useless information.
But is it useless? Not necessarily, right? Sometimes you'll write something, you don't put it in, and you don't really realize that you're going to use it until later on down the road. You're coming up with come across a problem, then you're like, oh man, how am I going to fix it? Oh wait, I mentioned this thing back way then. And you can use that thing you put in earlier to help you. Of course, the opposite side can happen too, right? You can create a problem and figure out a great way to fix it, and they're like, wait, I didn't set that up. Then you can go back and add it in later. But either way, you look smarter than you really are. But is it useless info? Hard to say for certain, right? Useless by what metric? Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
All of this needs to be contrived in a way to serve your story. Anything that doesn't is going to be dead weight. It's like if you were playing chess and you're like, okay, every fifth move, I'm just going to do something random that doesn't actually serve my overall strategy. You're given a certain amount of opportunities to achieve your goal, and you're just arbitrarily throwing some of them away.
Yeah, but you know what? I forget who said it. There's a great quote. If you get stuck on what is going to happen next in your story, just have a man walk in the front door with a gun. And then take it from there, right? Point is that sometimes a little random bits, that's actually pretty helpful. Anyway.
Have 80 or 100 or however many thousand words to tell your novel's story. Why would you waste any of them? Because
you don't have a budget. 80 or 100,000 words. You don't have a budget. There's no budget for the story. It's not like you have X number of words and that's it. And some minimum requirement. Unless if you go into a publisher, you've got a minimum requirement a lot of the time. But there's no rule. You've only got 80,000 or 100,000. Well, maybe your story's like going to take more than that, right? That ended up being 145,000 words. It's not because I was padding it. That's just how long it needed to be to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish with the story. And consequently, the proof copy just arrived over the weekend for it. Check out how thick this thing is. Right? It's a big, thick book, but it's a great book. You're going to love it when you get it. You better get it. You better get it. You better get it. You know what I mean? But there's no budget. It could be as long or as short as it needs to be, and just saying you only have 80 or 100,000 words. Well, no, you have as many words as you need.
You can apply this idea to multiple points within the writing process. A major part of line editing is getting rid of unnecessary words. Sentences can often be shifted around to cut a few words from them, and tightening up writing this way is often a great help in improving the flow of your prose.
Oh, that's for certain. There's, it's in fact, I've been going back as I was going through the editing stages of Warfare Qualified here. It's been like, man, well, that was I said that sentence in a convoluted way. How about we make it into 2 sentences? And you cut out half of it, and suddenly it's a lot more clear and more streamlined. Just because how you gave up writing. So yeah, that 100%. Certainly that is the case. But sometimes you want to be convoluted because that goes to characterization, right? But it also can go to, right, if you're in a situation where the character's confused and you're writing the sentences in a convoluted manner and it's like, oh, maybe it's showing confusion. Now, you don't want to throw the reader completely out of it as you're doing that, but, the way you write, the way you structure your writing goes to tone too, right? If you're doing short, clippy, 1 or 2 line boom, 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 boom kind of things, that creates a better pace, faster pace, whereas you draw longer paragraphs, slows the pace down. There's time and place for all these different things.
Having scene and chapter level structure is a big help as well. If there's always a goal, a sort of mini arc within a chapter, and that arc is somehow related to the main plot, then it's a good sign that you've written a meaningful scene and you're not just having the characters kill time until the ending. This is also why I'm not a huge fan of these exercises where you do a lot of world building or you create these character dossiers before you start writing, where you fill in all these details about your characters, things like that. What can happen here is you create a lot of details that you then feel obligated to shove into the novel. Setting and character information should serve the story, not just be interesting.
Yes, and in general, I don't do those sorts of thingies either, but I'll tell you what, I told another video here, I told about the workshop I did for doing a Fantasy Caper story, and the first few days of that workshop was just doing that, describing characters, describing the setting, figuring out what the plot was going to be, and having done all that, going into the final assignment, all right, it's midnight, give me a story, 8,000 word story by tomorrow night, midnight, go. And I couldn't get it done in 8,000 words. It ended up being a 12,000 word story that I got done in that time frame, and it was just zooming. And in fact, I didn't even get started till didn't even get started that first night because I was in Vegas and I had to drive back down here to San Diego. So I drove back down to San Diego, crashed, got up 8 in the morning, and just powered through that story. It was a great story. I was able to do that because I had the setting and I had the characters so firmly in mind, and I knew what they were what their goal was, and just so that can be a useful tool. It's the only time I've done that, but man, it was crushingly useful. It was great. I did not use all the information that I wrote in those workshop things in the story, but they're all there, and I knew them. And so in knowing them, you can allude to them without necessarily having to rotely use them, if that makes any sense. And that can give a sense of depth even if you don't utilize it. Is that necessary to do that? No, but I found that workshop and that exercise for that project, I found that was great. I don't normally do that. And also took a lot of time. Anyway.
These are details that you need to get across, not just ones that you want to get across. Now, don't take this as a discouragement against doing character sheets or world building or even outlining in general before you start writing. I think if you like to do those things, you should do them. But you should always be focused on, how does this relate to the story? How do these details serve the story? What details do I need? Overall, I think looking at your novel in this way gives you a really clear path of what should stay and what should go. There's bigger, harder to figure out questions here of what exactly do you want to tell in your story, but eliminating anything that obviously doesn't fit, anything that obviously doesn't have a purpose is a good starting point. Just like this is a good ending point for this video. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. I hope I didn't say anything that wasn't useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you.
Yeah, well, you definitely should check out what Carl's got going on there. Because, seems like a good dude. And this is the second time that I've checked out some of his videos and found them helpful and useful for opining in my own way. So, hey, yeah, definitely do check that dude out. But, yeah, again, I mostly agree with what he's saying here. But obviously, I had my more than 2 cents to add to it. But I think the biggest thing is people do this a lot for everything, but writers especially are like, make everything much more complicated than it needs to be. It's like, oh my God, what are the rules? Am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to do that? How long does it have to be? How short can it be? It's like, there are no rules. Rule number 1, there are no rules. Rule number 2, if someone tells you there's a rule, refer to rule number 1. Right? I mean, it's got to be as long as it's got to be to get the story done the way it needs to be done effectively. It could be as short. There's no limit. There's no requirement, except that it be done well. Just like Warfare Qualified has been done well. And you should go check it out. We have it up for pre-order here. Anyway, you can set it. It's on pre-order now on Amazon. It's also up on other places besides Amazon. Amazon, of course, is the biggest one. Warfare Qualified, military science fiction novel. If you come over here to michaelkingswood.com/books to read, you can click on the cover here and you can see the other places where it's at. Apple, Barnes & Noble, Google Play, and a few other places. It's processing on, the pre-order is processing on Kobo right now. It's not up yet. And, of course, my own website, I've got the files done, but I haven't finished getting that configured for my site. But pre-order will be up on my site, michaelkingswood.com/store here shortly, and will be available there. So if you dig science fiction of the military kind, you should definitely go check that out, because it's going to be great. If you like other types of books, I've got a bunch of them here. This is the Gloomer Vale Chronicles series. We're going through the chapters of the first book on Tuesdays. This is a Pericles Conspiracy here. This is a Alien First Contact story. I've done a whole bunch of short works. And you can see more and more and more and more. Lots and lots and lots of good stuff out there that I am pleased to bring to you for your enjoyment. We'll be doing an Indiegogo for Warfare Qualified starting, I think, next week, probably next Tuesday. I did a Kickstarter for it last summer, and that was to get me off my butt and force me to finish it. Now that it's finished, we're releasing the book on June 30th, and to get a little razzle dazzle going for the actual release, we're going to run an Indiegogo to help spread the word a bit and get a little bit of more upfront money. You know what I'm saying? So stay tuned for that, how that's going to work. And let's see what else is going on. Just the usual stuff around here on the channel. I'm going to continue commenting on various things as they come up. On Tuesday we'll do Gloomer Vales. Saturdays we'll do Story Saturday with shorter works. And I'm more and more going to get back into doing my Music Monday music discussions, discovering new music and seeing what I think about it. I did that for a while and I had a lot of fun with it, but I got away from it because I didn't really want to be a music reaction channel. I wanted to keep this focused on writing and what I'm doing. But I do enjoy discovering new music, so I'm going to come up with a balance on that. Anyway, that's all I got for this one. Thanks for sticking around. Hope you got something out of it. If you did, let me know what you think in the comments, and come back next time. Until then, don't do anything I wouldn't do.